This conference will now be recorded.
There it is. There it is. Welcome to the Mass TLC Talent Community Meeting. Today, happy to have Jackie Dube, who's Senior Vice President of Talent Optimization at Predictive Index, and Mike Zani, who's CEO of Predictive Index, to talk to us about Talent Management Survival Toolkit amidst crisis. Thank you so much for taking time out during this fragile time to join us today. This is our new normal, and we are all going to get through this together, especially with fresh ideas, tips, and tricks. My name is Nayla Daly. I'm the Communications Manager at Mass Technology Leadership Council for the talent community. For those of you who don't know who Mass TLC is, it is the largest and most powerful tech organization in the region, bringing together over 500 companies together to form our community. Oopsies. See, I always do that. Sorry, guys. Always do that. Anyway, I also want to say thank you to our community sponsors who allow our community to gather like this all year long. I will show them at the end of this. And also thank you to our global sponsors who are here. This is a talent community event, and I just want to give some instructions. And while I do, Jackie, you're welcome to go ahead and take over the, yep, there you go. There you go, yep. I just want to remind everyone, while we are going to hear a very important brief presentation to make sure you are on mute while they are presenting, we have a chat box that you can definitely type your questions on. And at the end of the presentation, we will go through the questions. At the end of their presentation, please, we would love your questions. We have some great people here we can, showcase, talk through our challenges and our questions with. Remember to take the mute off. And I really encourage you all to show your faces in your environments. After all, we are all in the same situation. I would love to see your faces. With that, I give it over to Jackie and Mike.
Great, thanks, Nayla. I just want to say that it's, we've relied on Mass TLC in many ways throughout our time at the Predictive Index, and it's so important in these changing times for all of us to get together and share ideas as things are so fluid every day. I've been in the talent field for over 20 years, so I've worked through the economic crisis of 2008. I worked for a electric motorcycle company that we were way ahead of our time, and we grew from 0 to 250 employees globally, and then in 2008 had to act quickly and reduce, and we ended up filing for bankruptcy. So while those times are trying, I think we learned so much through those experiences, and hoping to share them with you today. And I'll give Mike your chance to introduce yourself.
Great, thank you, Jackie. Firstly, I'm very lucky to work with Jackie. She makes me look better every day, bringing talent optimization to our workplace. In 2002, my business partner and I had the opportunity to start in identifying and investing in a single company to buy. So we've sort of been serial entrepreneurs where we buy a company and with other people's money, we put ourselves in place as senior management. We take the company over, we run it, grow it for 5+ years, and 3 of the 4 cases we've sold those companies. And it was really on that journey that I actually had the opportunity to meet Jackie in 2009, right after she went through the, sort of the crisis management with Vectrix, the electric motorcycle company. We've had, my business partner and I have had the opportunity to take companies through several reductions of force, obviously the 08-09 crisis. And it's from that perspective of having to, jump in and run 4 different companies, learn those businesses and deal with those respective crises that we're coming to you with this advice. Hope you get a lot out of it today.
Thanks, Mike. So if you think about this quote here, it's not the most intellectual of the species that survives. It's not the strongest that survives, but the species that survives is the one that is able best to adapt and adjust to the changing environment in which it finds itself. And I just think that we have to embrace that it's change every single day. We're all in this together. It just kind of encapsulates where we are. Mike, and I know you have a different perspective. Mike is a former Olympic sailing coach, so let you share your thoughts.
Yeah, as in a former life, I spent too much time on the water, and I became a student of sort of maritime history. And this is a quote out of from Sir Francis Drake when he had to tell his crew that they had to sail around the world as opposed to go home. And it's really let the storm show your mastery. I think it's very apropos in a time like this, because I think this is where leaders and managers are really going to be pushed, sometimes uncomfortably, tons of load on their shoulder. But it's just the entire teams have to really dig in, and great teams, great cultures, great managers, great leaders respond in these times, and these when we'll be tested, and these are also when we will uncover weak cultures, weak teams, and weak managers. And we have to really rise up to let the storm show our mastery. So this was very meaningful to me, and certainly is a mantra at our company now, and we hope helps you.
Thanks, Mike. So if we think about our current environment that we're in, we're all in crisis management. Some of us might have been more prepared, but we're going to talk through some of the things that we've done, some best practices. Almost all of us are managing remote teams, and what that means and how to do that effectively. All of your team structures, communications, how you're adapting to change, managing through a hiring freeze, and honestly, potential reduction in forces, while keeping in mind all of the emotions and morale of your teams. So if you think about crisis management, I mean, there's the best practices that I'm sure you all know, is to get a team together to that will focus on the changing environment, put some plans together around worst case scenarios, best case scenarios, so you can plan for yourself, thinking about employees, and most importantly, how you're going to communicate. When we were thinking about coronavirus, and I know it happened very quickly, probably about a month and a half to 2 months ago, we put a task force together. And our meetings were fairly light, but we knew we should be thinking about it. And over time, I mean, it just happened very quickly. I think on a Monday, we were like, where are we today? And by Thursday, we were 100% remote. And so, I think it's those things that kind of get you through the crisis in preparation. And now we have to start the next round of preparation around, when do we go back to work? How do we go back to work? What are those milestones? Employees want to know. Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about your thoughts in the key triangle that we were discussing this morning?
I do. So we have 6 senior vice presidents. Jackie is one of them. And Jackie plays a key role in the normal course of business. But what I think is really interesting in this time, that when you go from the senior executive, the CFO, and the head of people or talent, you may call it any number of things in your organization, but that key triangle has been working together more closely than ever before. And it's because of the loops of this, we're going to get into it in terms of scenario analyses, what could happen to our revenue, what could, how far is it going to drop? How are we on cash reserves? And in most modern organizations, 65% of the costs are people related. Compensation for people, benefits for people, housing people. And if you think about tightening up that key triangle, making sure you have one, explicitly state we're gonna use this key triangle, because what you're talking about is the core assets, the people assets, the financial assets, and the strategy. Making sure that key triangle is tight, and really tight communications, because it all stems from people want to say, what if we do X? What if we do Y? And I think now more than ever, in our last, 50% of our meetings, Jackie is leading it with input from the CFO on the implications of some of the scenarios that we've come up with. So just wanted to be very explicit about the importance of that. And if your organization at the moment doesn't, hasn't said, let's set up that key triangle and make sure that it has the support it needs to be able to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about the, addressing employees' feelings head on and in advance. So when we 2 weeks ago, which seems like 2 years ago, determined on Wednesday night that, okay, we need to go remote tomorrow. We knew what that meant for employees, and from a tactical perspective, how are we going to pull that off and pulling all that together? But then comes, we knew right after that comes the anxiety of what does this mean for us? What does this mean for our business? A third of our business is on-site training. And we could have just as an organization talked about going remote and logistically getting that all taken care of. But, Mike and his partner Daniel knew that if we didn't solve those fears and address those fears right now, as we go remote, they're going to fester, and we could get ahead of that. And they recorded. So they recorded a video, I don't know, maybe 2.5-minute video, just being completely honest and transparent. Okay, we're going remote. What does this mean for organization? And being quite honest about the uncertainty and that they didn't have all the answers, but we're looking at it and we're thinking about all of those things as a business to just give our employees the sense like management is thinking about cost saving right now and we're ahead of this. So you worry about you, we're going to worry about the business in this moment. And I just think that it was such a key moment for organization to be able to move on and become remote and set up the cadence for trust and communication. So we can go to the next slide. And I think one of the, or something everyone's probably dealing with now, unless you're essential workers in healthcare, et cetera, is managing remote teams. And every organization's at a different level of preparedness and experience in this. For PI, we have probably about 20% of our workforce that was already remote or works remote part of the day. So for us, it was a easier transition. We were able to set that up in 12 hours. Everyone had a laptop already. Everyone had a monitor they could take home. But one of the things that I found most interesting is that we have a pretty good culture that we're proud of and a trusting environment. But our first call with our senior management team was about trust. And one of our senior vice presidents is remote. She lives in Florida. And she said to our team, like, I know we have remote, but you have to trust your employees. You have to not worry about what they're doing, how they're doing it. And for us to be a successful workforce, it starts with trust. And it was pretty impactful because a lot of organizations don't allow remote or flexibility for that reason alone, is they don't know how to hold their employees accountable. And just talking about trust and throwing that into the conversation for a trusting conversation was pretty key. And I don't know, Mike, thoughts on that?
The idea, I think everyone is going to get to this new efficiency of working remote. It's going to make us better as organizations, but trust is foundational to everything. I think there will be some of those old school senior management teams that really want to go back, and I can't wait until we have all of our people in the same room together. And it could be from that underlying aspect of trust. One of the benefits that I think human capital professionals can do are try to come up with some efficiency metrics to prove that the work is getting done efficiently once we start settling into this new element. And I think you're going to have a lot of flexibility coming out of this after you're able to prove that point, likely positive.
Yeah, and so some examples of ways to keep your team engaged is to, and we this was on the earlier slide around an intentional communication plan. So, develop the cadences that you're going to hear from your senior management. So employees have an expectation. Okay, I know I'm going to learn more about the company on these certain and keeping that schedule. So every Friday we have what we call PITV, and it's, in advance of the meeting, we send out an anonymous questionnaire and we answer employees' questions. So whatever they come up, we answer them. And it's very open conversation. We have an all company meeting, which we've always had. We had that first one remote this week. So keeping these cadences of communication open. I'm not sure if you all use Slack, but we use Slack as our communication tool. And holistically in our organization, employees have taken over Slack channels or developed one for parenting at PI. So like we're all now homeschooling our children, has his taped to the floor, I think, so they don't come up in the background, and ensuring that we're all figuring out how to do this together. And, Nayla said this earlier that, it's okay if we have technical difficulties. We all experience this. The expectations are there, and just being open about those things. So I think, consistent cadence of communication, setting up ways to engage your employees and things that interest them, and making sure that you're flexible and trusting, I think are some keys for managing your teams.
You brought up a really interesting point on the parenting at PI. One of the threads, someone came up with the idea that says, hey, I went into my cable service provider and there's an advanced functionality where you can actually throttle the bandwidth by IP address, so that if your kids are stealing all of your bandwidth when you're in the middle of a webinar, like we might be right now, that you can actually throttle down their devices to make sure that they're not stealing as much bandwidth. And that was one of the things that, parenting at PI, a Slack channel, enabled, spread pretty virally in the organization. It's a great tool if you are a little bit tech savvy and are willing to fight through some of the complications of your cable provider. But to come up with this thing that says, when I need it, when I have a mission critical communication to the organization, to clients, that you can steal that bandwidth and make sure you're not shutting down homeschooling, as an example. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, Jackie mentioned PITV. This is a 15-minute, the entire senior team is on video, Q&A from our organization. I would have said that before this crisis, PITV was used by 10% of the organization. But it was a sort of a communication channel that was idling out there. We actually hijacked it for this crisis. And it's turning out to probably be the most valuable way for us at the end of a week at 3 p.m. to have a town hall to communicate with everyone in the organization. You may have some communication channels out there that have become all of a sudden more important and that you may need to reinvest in. Because the company needs, we need that sense of community. We need ongoing communication. It came up in one of these PITV sessions, which was, we should institute a buddy system, making sure that no person in our organization is not checked in on every day, wanting to make sure that the support mechanism for our community, our work community, can benefit, because some people's home communities may not be as well established. Maybe they just moved to the city. Maybe they're just out of a relationship, or they're in an apartment where it's just not a safe, secure environment at their home. Their work community is just so valuable to them. So you may look back at hijacking some of your existing programs or communication channels and making them work harder for you in this time of crisis. At the same time, we've learned it was too much. We had to shut down other communication channels. Because if you spool one up, it's not that they can just take more. You need to make sure you also shut others down.
Yeah, I was going to make that point, is that one thing that we're working on now is the over communication and trying to centralize and organize, because everyone's getting overwhelmed and they want to share what they're doing and all of this new content that's coming out, but it's so important also to be more organized about it. And so we're still working through that. Okay, so the next thing that is really important is surviving a hiring freeze or reduction in force. And I think that one key to this is alignment and messaging, because employees, no matter how tight you try and keep a communication, they're looking to leadership on everything, any comment you make, any decision that's made. So ensuring that the organization is aligned on, if you're having hiring freeze, why, what positions, when we're expecting to hire again, because it's not always, in maybe one department or across the organization. So getting that clear messaging out is important, understanding what the questions might be, and being as transparent as possible. I think that we had this conversation with employees, and I mentioned this email or video that Mike and Daniel had sent out the day we went remote, and it was about the hiring freeze. And they were very clear that we're going to have to do more with less, and we're going to be asking our employees to do more. So it's critical that you focus on what is the priority. How we spend our time is so much more than it was before, because we have less. And acknowledging that and leading through that and getting everyone aligned on that message and making sure they know what's important. So how do you prioritize your work now? And then, when we think about, actually, Mike, do you want to share anything around the hiring freeze before we kind of talk about reduction?
There was, the hiring freeze was sort of the first salvo. We're looking into various aspects of reduction in force. One of the things that Daniel and I did 3 weeks ago is we stopped our own compensation. And this isn't going to save the company or not. If you take the 2 senior people and stop their compensation, it was really symbolic. It was symbolic to the fact that we're in this together. And what I was shocked at was, line employees coming up and saying, I'd be willing to reduce my compensation. I'd be willing to reduce my 401k contribution that the company makes. People, surprisingly, and I mean, you want to bring tears to your eyes that individuals are coming to you and their compensation and saying, take some of mine. So I think symbolically, if your senior team can show that sacrifice, it sets up a cadence. So when you ask your employees to do more with less, they're not going to get the help in hiring that they're going to want to. We're probably going to cancel some of their external, whether it's software or consulting or programs where they were going to get help, and they have to grind on their own with fewer resources. Those are tough conversations. And if you can set it up that we're in this together, and I bring up an example. If every individual contributor in our company took a 5% pay reduction, that would be more than Daniel and I's entire compensation for a year. And it's just, but you couldn't look someone in the eye and saying, we're going to have a 5% pay reduction if, senior management wasn't really to take it, on the chin themselves. And at that, we've looked and are about to implement a prorated program where, based on seniority, we're going to take different levels of, compensation haircuts for a finite amount of time. But it's those tough leadership decisions, because someone who was just promoted to VP saying, well, I have to take 5% more than than 2 weeks ago when I was a director. And it's like, that's what leadership is. And it came from this alignment, getting alignment on that at the top, and being able to talk to the company openly about the numbers and about the things that we were going to likely have to do in order to survive this. It really gained alignment, and I was surprised. And it was something that we did without even asking our board. And the board has already says, well, we'll work on your compensation. We're like, don't worry about our compensation. We're worried about our people. And that that symbolically, I just can't say how much if your senior team can do something above and beyond to show that solidarity and leadership.
Yeah, and there's the alignment thing or topic again. As we have these discussions, there's so many different levers that you have as an organization to pull, and getting, asking all the questions, understanding the relations, the pros and cons, and the scenario analysis is really important, because once you make those decisions, you need the buy-in and the leadership to execute on them. And so if we shift to, reductions in force, I'm not sure how many of you have been through a reduction, but they're hard for everyone. And, there's so much focus in the beginning on that scenario and planning who and how, and how to take care of those folks that would be exiting your organization. And it's so important to have a plan for what happens right after that. And how do you communicate with your, survivors, the people that are left in your organization, and get back to a new normal as quick as possible. And, and how do you do that now that you're remote? How do you get everyone into this new normal right after, they might have lost their friends, they don't get to say goodbye to them. How do you create a community and trust after this just happens? And, alignment, conversations, reaching out, and that communication plan, comes right back up is, how are you going to communicate? What is your cadence and your message and leadership around that?
And normally with a reduction in force, you would position it to the extent possible and say, best practices are not to trickle reduction in forces out and do one this week, one 4 weeks from now, because it leaves people uncertain, it leaves them on loose footing. You'd really love the opportunity to say, we did one, we planned it out, that's the last one, let's get back to work, we're in this together, and some stability. Given this crisis, we may not be able to say that going forward. But that's when it gets back to the transparency with the survivors. You're like, this is what we have done. We weren't sure, we're not sure what the future holds. Like all things, we're going to be paying very close attention to what the data is telling us about. Do we come out of this thing in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? Not many people know, and there are a lot of pundits weighing in on that. But this may be a time when you cannot say that is the last one. But I think you can say, we did what we thought was necessary at the time, and we're going to be very transparent with you about where we are. So let's get back to work in as stable of ground as we can. And when we think the environment is changing, we're going to let you know. So it's not going to be this thing where they can feel like, you're like, I've built this trust with the organization, so I can get back to as much work as I possibly can.
And being transparent about what those goals are. In the beginning of the year of 2020 for PI, we had very clear goals. We had 3 very distinct goals. We printed them on a coin and gave a coin to everyone. So I think getting back there after a reduction is like, okay, what are our new 3 goals? So everyone can rally behind that and make their own judgments and like, okay, we're either tracking towards that, or maybe I should be asking these questions because I see that we're not where we thought we would be, or same as they would have, 3 months ago or 2 months ago, according to the goals that we had. All right. And then mitigating changes at your company. We really talked through all of this, aligning on a goal, communicating your action plan, anticipate resistance. We talk about this all the time, and more about, okay, what would the reaction be to this? We've had employees, like Mike had mentioned, reach out and say, I will champion this with this group of employees because I'm close to them. I really want this to be successful. So embracing those folks and using them. And then, again, being transparent about what the fears may be. And I think one of the interesting things about this crisis is that it's usually, or when there's, in 2008, when I look back and you're more managing through the financial crisis and, how are you going to manage your household? It's so different now where everyone, it might hit them at different times. They're dealing with school closures and who knows what's happening with their spouse or their roommate, and being okay with managing and letting employees have those emotions and expecting them. I think it's super critical.
Yeah, and the fear, because of the fear of actual sickness, where people's aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents may actually be in a situation where they're having thoughts, at least, that they could be in physical trouble. Really changes the whole paradigm. Worrying about your financial security is one thing. Worrying about financial security plus your health, or the health of those who you love, is quite another dimension that I think is somewhat unprecedented to this generation. Something we haven't seen since probably World War II.
Yeah, and I think that having a contingency plan for some of those essential workers that you have, whether it's your IT person, your CFO, if they get sick, or somehow have to step out of your organization for whatever reason, succession planning was always important. I think it's even more critical now for everyone to think about how that work gets done. And I think we're pretty close to done, and we can open up for questions.
Before we go, Jackie,
Yeah.
I did wanted to articulate one thing about sort of communication. I don't know if you get a chance to look at my video. Instead of using a webcam, I'm actually I've used an external camera and that is higher definition. I've been able to aim the camera so it's actually on a plane with my eyes. It does take time to get used to, like, not looking down at your computer, but looking up at the camera, and invested in a lapel mic. So this is a very echoey room. I'm not sure if you're hearing an echo, but it's designed to not hear an echo. This isn't something that your entire setting up, making sure that what you're pointing at is appropriate. If you're just having a meeting one-on-one, it doesn't really matter. But the idea that if you're senior management who's going to be doing a lot more transmitting of messaging to clients, to shareholders, suppliers, partners, employees, to make sure that they get in a place where they can really put together professional, tight, outbound communication. Making sure the lighting is right. You can see, if you look at different videos, you can see who's actually got enough exposure of light on their face. Jackie's actually using some of the headsets that we use for our sales team, which noise canceling. So even if her kids were homeschooling in the back, she's not being distracted, and the mic is designed to not pick up those noises. You can do small things like this for your people to really lower their stress level, improve the quality of communication, and it's subtle things, but if your senior leadership team has their quote unquote shit put together with respect to this, they can model the right behavior for the rest of the organization, and hopefully step up the entire game of remote and mobile.
Awesome.
I have a question. I was listening through this, and early on you talked about how the minute this COVID-19 news dropped, you were very transparent with your company. And, I just want to understand, I think it would be helpful for everyone to know how you're navigating budget changes, how you're being transparent about the loss of bonuses, if there are a loss of bonuses. How are you navigating being transparent? I can't imagine that's easy.
So I'll answer that, and Mike, you can chime in. And then Rachel, who's on the phone, I'd love to, if you want to, she's the receptor of all of the messages. So you can get her perspective also. But we're, like we said, we communicate every Friday. And those questions do get asked. And very early on, we had some big projects going on that were immediately put on hold, and we identified that we were building out a new 30,000 square foot office space, and we immediately put that on hold. We've asked employees to look at discretionary spending 2 weeks ago and said, let's get in front of this, let's do it now. We had an all-company meeting on Tuesday. We talked about redundancy in IT programs, that we've done some analysis and asked our employees to, if there's programs we were thinking of consolidating, we've asked in advance before canceling them if that would, hinder anyone's experience or work. And they've been very responsive. And, you can take my license, you can do this. So everyone really wants to pitch in, but just being very open and transparent in what we're trying to do.
I'd actually, I think it's a great idea, Jackie. I'd love to hear how Rachel's been receiving some of these comms. Sorry to put you on the webinar, Rachel.
Oh, no, this is great. Thank you. So this is my first experience of a crisis in the workplace, and I can't thank our leadership enough for being so transparent and just keeping us in the know constantly, with PITV, with video communication, everything. My brother-in-law, who's been in the workforce longer than I have, he actually gave me a call and he was like, what is your leadership telling you? Because I'm not getting much. And so just the fact that I was able to hopefully calm his nerves a little bit, with just giving him information that our team has given us, has been really amazing. And I just feel grateful to be in the know, whether it's going to be good or bad. Yeah, just I think we all really appreciate just transparency. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
I have another question. This is Mackenzie with Mass TLC, and I know this is obviously a really stressful time. And like Mike alluded to, it's not just with work, it's personal. It's your family members you're worried about, it's health, it's everything. But I know for Mass TLC, we've seen some positive in it. And one is that we've been able to really fast track going virtual. It's something since last year we've been brainstorming, how do we reach people in different ways? So something that probably would have taken us longer, we truly had to just jump to it and, in 2 weeks, just start doing everything virtually. So just wondering with PI or other companies, like what positive has come out of it? Have you seen, good in this time of kind of crisis? And, mine is that I spend more time with my dog who keeps running through the background, but I think, there is some positive and some opportunity that comes here. So just wondering, what others are experiencing.
Certainly, we felt that the senior team never had a stand-up, and we decided to institute a 15-minute stand-up. The very first stand-up took 30 minutes, and it was painful when you wanted it to be 15. But our stand-up yesterday was 14 minutes. We finished a minute early. I think we have a higher degree of alignment than we've ever had. We're running tighter meetings. We're realizing that all that wasted time of physically meeting. I mean, it is nice. This is when you really get to know people before meetings and such. So there is a cost to it, but I think people can stay really efficient. We don't have our commutes, and people are finding more time. And people with that more time, they're even putting in new programs. We have a couple of people who are in their former lives personal trainers. They're running programs internally to make sure that people are staying healthy and fit, and doing some tracking systems so that people can have that consistency in their organization. So that organic element of your organization supporting each other with skills that maybe people didn't even realize they had.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to jump in there. Jonathan Ralton has a question, or not a question, more of a statement. You said you can contribute some positive example effect. We'd love to hear from you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to offer one thing that we started talking about yesterday with some leaders across the country is trying to take the opportunity to build up more trust with some of our clients that we have a small portion of clients sometimes that really insist on some of our people working on site with them. And sometimes that's okay, but sometimes that affects people's work-life balance and or being able to engage other people in other locations, in other states, that kind of thing. Like they don't get the opportunity to work with that client. So we're trying to take the opportunity to really prove to these clients right now, while we have to work remotely, that we can do it. You know, we can kick ass. You know, it's you know, it can be a good experience to try to carry that forward when appropriate in the future, when the requirements get relaxed, to influence those people who that affects.
Thanks, Jonathan. And if anyone wants to respond to that. Also, Laura, you said you have feedback, and guys, please feel free to just jump in there. But Laura, go ahead.
Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. So Mike, I'm going to start off with, as a woman of a certain age, you don't want high def camera, just saying. So so I think some feedback too is just as I talk to people, you know, friends that are in workplaces, myself, my own team, you know, I think the other thing that can happen here too is that if you're built like me, you go right into like hyper mode. And that means that you're overworking. You know, you're at your desk at 6:30 in the morning, you're eating lunch in front of your computer. And, you know, I'm kind of like, don't do what I'm doing, as I talk to my team about making sure that they manage their time the right way, that they get outside and exercise. So I'm kind of checking in to make sure everyone goes for like a power walk late in the afternoon. Because it's a really easy habit to get into when you work from home, to constantly be, you know, emailing people, checking in on things, and that overwhelmed feeling, that's when you start to have people burning out and crashing. And so I think that's the big thing too, is as I talk to different people, making sure that they're managing their day the right way. They're not overworking. I trust they're doing their job. So when you talk about trust, I think that's a backdrop to it. I think people get really anxious. Like if I'm not on my email, they think I'm goofing off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And I think if you create, say, if you have Slack and you have a channel for this, you know, we have purposely asked our people to ask personal questions at the start of a meeting. How are you doing? You know, an idea came up where, you know, people live used to go on walking meetings from time to time when the meeting was sort of one-on-one. You can still do a walking meeting. 3 people can grab their cell phones. Now, you might not be on Zoom and face or screen sharing, but to the extent that you can get away with it, have people go out and certainly on a day in New England that's like this, where you really want to get outside. Because you're right, the trap, you know, Laura, that you point out is you take those 2 hours you might have booked as commute time, when you might have listened to NPR or a podcast, or just got into your own thoughts with your favorite music, and we've maybe converted that into work time, and that may work for the first 3 or 4 weeks of a crisis, but that's certainly not a new normal. Or if it was, we would have huge issues.
And a lot of our employees have their computers set up in their kitchen. So, you know, for me, I'm in my basement, I can leave my workspace, but for a lot of employees, they can't. So really setting the tone with that is really important, I think. It's a super important point. One thing that, if you do use Slack, one thing that wasn't so popular previous to this remote that's really popular now is there's an app on Slack you can get. It's called Coffee Buddies. And if you sign into the channel, it randomly pairs you with employees across the organization for a 20-minute conversation. So they're not in your department and you're not supposed to talk about work. And our employees have really embraced this, and they take pictures of their computer screens, but it's a great way to stay connected and still meet others across the organization.
You know, I just have one last question. If nobody else does, please join in, announce yourself, tell us who you are. I encourage you. I see some members here that we love, and we hold dear, but I'll jump in with a question. You know, with everybody has a virtual team right now, what are some new ways team members, you know, can hold on to each other for accountability? without the face-to-face interaction. I know there are teams out there who are already virtual, but not 100% virtual. So that's my question.
For us, I think that it's the stand-ups. So a lot of our teams already had stand-ups planned, but with your team, if you can have a daily stand-up for 15 minutes, check in, how are you doing, what's going on with your day, because you don't have that flyby any longer. And now we're trying to organize stand-ups. So team meetings you can be in multiple meetings at different times. So we're trying to organize calendars so stand-ups happen at certain times of the day. But those are amazing for our teams and just a great way to connect. So I highly recommend that.
Yeah, I think for more complicated accountability measures, like, many product teams are already using things like Asana boards. And I'm not saying that you should use Asana versus another program, but there are accountability tools, project workflow tools where you can really keep things moving along. I think people have dabbled in this stuff, but never really used the full power of it. And the difference between companies that have embraced Google Docs, which makes it easier for two people to edit one document, are potentially ahead of companies that were still using Microsoft Word, where you have to send someone a file for things like collaboration. I think we're probably not going backwards with this remote. We're going to learn a lot of things really quickly. So the sharing of best practices is going to be super powerful, because someone is going to come up with this is what this team is using, and it's the glue which now holds this team together. We'll see those things pop up.
I just saw a question about whiteboards. So there is a technology out there called Jamboard, which you can, I don't know too much about it. It's totally outside of my realm of responsibility, but we just got some Jamboards in the office because we had some remote folks, and it's basically a whiteboard in the office that we had, and then there's a whiteboard on the computer that someone remotely could go onto. From that technology, there's a link now that you can now use as a whiteboard, and you can share that with teams in the same way that you would a regular whiteboard. And I'm happy to find more information about that, and I can share it with Nayla just about the Jamboard technology, and then she can share that out to you. I don't know too much about it, but I know that's what we're using.
So does anyone have any other suggestions who are on about best practices, ways to connect, anything your organization is doing? I can say within Mass TLC, I'll volunteer this. Kate, on our team, we have an open, what we call water cooler, 9:15 every morning. It's just a standing meeting. We all jump in there. It's amazing in that 15 minutes, that free flow of ideas, what happens. We've actually created some strategy out of that and implemented it. So that's worked for Mass TLC. If you guys have something, please share with us.
A few people at PI have actually been hosting some lunchtime workouts, which has been fun for people to get involved with. We have a couple folks who are actually like certified trainers. So that's been great. It's giving people new ways to move. I think that's really helpful with mental health right now. If you can't leave the house, or just to get out of the seat, probably in your kitchen, and still focusing on like initiatives of health and wellness, even being virtual. So that has been really awesome to see continue, even though we're not in the office.
Thank you, Rachel. So, because it's a little quiet, I think it would be better to give everyone back a couple minutes of their day. Before saying that, please jump in there. Oh, wait, hold on. We have a question. Oh, it's the whiteboard one. Jonathan just thought, sorry. Rita saying something. Yep, whiteboards. I'm thinking about whiteboards and how we use them in the office. Have you found a replacement? How do you handle this missing source? And Jonathan gave feedback. Microsoft Whiteboard app also can help multiple users at the same time with a single drawing space. Thank you, Jonathan. So I just want to say that this has been recorded podcast style. We are going to distribute this recording. Actually, I'm sorry, I don't know if we're going to distribute it or somehow make it available to you. I will figure out what the strategy is, whether it's through Predictive Index and Mass TLC, whether it's through an email or a website, but you will have access to this, and you will have access to more strategies and information from Predictive Index. Also, I will be sending, one of the things we are doing is we are using an application called Mobilize to bring all our members together in certain communities. I will send some information about that. Again, it's just about deeper sharing and learning from each other. So unless anybody has anything else, you can jump in there now. I want to say thank you so much for sharing your wealth of information and your time to Jackie and to Mike. And that's it.
Thank you, Naila. Thank you, Mass TLC.
Thank you so much.
All the attendees. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
A wonderful
Thanks to
day.
all of you. Thank you.